Hello, everybody, and welcome to Talking Transformers, a podcast, a bi-weekly podcast that is going to involve me and a rotating cast of characters as we talk about all of the important things that are going on in the world of the Transformers. Some things that are timely and some things that aren't, but ultimately it's going to be a great one-on-one conversation. Links are down below to the audio podcast if that's what you prefer. And if you want to watch the full video podcast, you can find that exclusively on our Patreon. Again, links down below. We really hope that you enjoy this, and I look forward to your feedback. Take care, everybody, and enjoy the show. Chris, glad to have you on the show. I suspect this will be the first of many to come.
Well, you know, when you put you and me in a room together, Dave, we rarely get through everything we want to say before we have to stop.
I know, it's almost like we perhaps have to record a part 2 of a podcast, Chris.
Don't spoil
it. Chris, this episode, I thought, given the fact that we are at the beginning of 2025, it would be a good idea to look back not only at 2024, but take a look at where the franchise currently is at the moment, because I know you and I have very similar opinions on this, and I'd be anxious to put them out to the general public. But beforehand, let's talk a little bit about 2024. What was good in 2024 for you for Transformers?
Well, it's definitely a year of contrasts, I thought, as a 40th anniversary, you know. There's a lot of good stuff in 2024. I mean, I think Transformers 1 has to go at the top of the list, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
With as much success as it deserved to.
It's fair to say, perhaps the last 20 years of movies haven't found the unanimous love that Transformers 1 seems to have found.
With fans, certainly.
Yeah,
yes,
definitely.
If not with mass audiences, you know. It's the kind of movie that could only ever have been done in animation. It's not the kind of movie that the live-action movies could ever have been. And, you know, I will say it's not a movie that contained any surprises for me. It very much was the newest recipe cooked up using the same base ingredients that most big Transformers lore-based stories have for the last 10 to 15 years. But it was an enjoyable version of that story that I enjoyed a lot, and that I really must watch again now that I got the Blu-ray for Christmas.
Yeah, I know. I still need to pick it up digitally, not digitally rather, but physical format, and sit down and watch it. Yeah, absolutely. Like, just for me, for everything that was put out over, that isn't toy related, perhaps over 2024, it was by far and away the best. I think, 5 minutes into that movie with the backstory and the Matrix and all of that, you were like, I have arrived.
Okay. Yeah.
This is for me. Yeah.
I knew going into the film, I said shortly after I saw the film, I tweeted it, I said, I wouldn't worry too much about spoilers, folks, because I don't think there was anything in there that surprised me. There's it's a version of the story that's been well trodden at this point. Perhaps the most, completely told version as compared to all the other versions that have been put in novels and cartoon flashbacks and things like that. But it was when it started up and it was like Primus and the 13, and I was like, oh, you're really going whole hog on this then. Like, I knew this would be in here, but to foreground it in such a way, not even save it to quietly drizzle out like as backstory later, to open with this and tell the world, we're this is the bit of Transformers that we're getting down and rooting around in for the next 2 hours. I wouldn't call it a surprise, but it was enlightening, informative.
Yeah, I think just the fact that they were able to just embrace the legacy and the history of Transformers, every aspect of it, from the Quintessons to Primus and the 13. And, you and I have had, and we won't talk about this too much in depth, but you and I have talked about the 13, and I have made it no bones that I'm not a big fan of it. This is my favorite rendition of the 13 because there's nothing necessarily special about them. They were just the first, but...
Well, you're not wrong. But I will say, and you may be surprised at how I can spin this off into this. But I think it does, in its way, speak to the nature and state of Transformers as a franchise currently, which is there is quite a lot of stuff in that film that if you step back as a fan, doesn't need to be in that film to tell the story it's trying to tell about Optimus Prime and Megatron tearing down a corrupt ruler. The in-depth use of the 13, the presence at all of the Quintessons. These are ideas that are only in the film because they exist as part of a 15-year-old lore Bible, which was drawing from a 20-year-old comic that was trying to retcon a 40-year-old cartoon into alignment with a comic. You don't need the Quintessons in that film. I don't even know how much you need the 13 to tell the story of Optimus Prime and Megatron tearing down Sentinel's corrupt rule. And it does speak to the attitude with which a lot of Transformers media is currently being created, where there is an adherence to brand history over innovation. It's not a universal truth. I mean, the other media that we've enjoyed this year, the Skybound comic, that has pleasantly surprised me with how. So again, surprise isn't quite the right word, because much like Transformers 1, Skybound, it hasn't contained a lot of surprises. Oh, Starscream has broken away from the Decepticons and rallied up the Combaticons to form his own army, has he? Well, I've never seen that before, you know. But Daniel Warren Johnson, the artist and writer, no, he's not the artist anymore. Sorry, he's just writing it now. I forgot. Loving Jorge Corona's work on that book, though. I think I might actually enjoy the art under him a bit more than I did under Johnson, and that was a big surprise. I think he's doing fantastic work on that comic. But he is not laboring under the current Transformers lore that Hasbro really insists everything else adhere to. And that in and of itself is quite a makes for a pleasantly different reading experience, even though a lot of what he's doing is Sunbow inspired. It marks Skybound's work as quite different from literally everything else that's happening in Transformers. You know, you look at Earthspark. Earthspark is a show that is focused on, and that this is very much to Earthspark's credit, it is a show that is focused on introducing the new. Its main cast of 5 characters are all brand new characters, and that's what's good about it. But its whole approach to being new is like, this is the next generation after the war, and the backstory that exists in the past of that universe and that war is a variation on the Optimus Prime and Megatron were friends who fell out over an attempt to bring unity to Cybertron, resulting in a war. And the 13 are part of that universe as well. And that's, unfortunately, I will say Earthspark took a bit of a hit this year. The second season has proven to have lost a lot of the talent that made the first season strong. In terms of media, I would have to say that the way Earthspark has, in the parlance of the young, fallen off, has been a bit of a disappointment. But fortunately, we do still have Skybound and Transformers 1 this year to perk things up. It's and as a 40th anniversary, movie, cartoon, comic. I'm not even sure when the last time we had something also new happening all at once. With obviously there have been Transformers comics for non-stop for not nearly 20 years now, 2005. But, IDW was sort of a known quantity at the time. And when we've got something like Earthspark and Skybound and Transformers 1, all quite fresh resets as compared to the ongoing movie series, the ongoing aligned the cartoon continuity, and the ongoing IDW comics. It's the last year or so, and it's a good time for a 40th anniversary as well. There's a lot of entry points going on in Transformers right now, and that's sort of why it's sad that Transformers 1, I think, didn't reach a wider audience, because it's a great entry point, and you can see that certainly with the smaller audience that it has reached. My YouTube stats went bang! People were looking up Transformers after that film came out. There were people out there wanting to learn more. And that's as much of a mark of success as far as health and strength of fandom goes for me, as far as I'm concerned, even if it didn't necessarily rake in the bucks.
I would completely agree with you on almost everything that you said. I think my love and enjoyment of specifically Daniel Warren Johnson's Transformers book has waned a little bit in the last few months. I
Yeah, sure. I
wasn't.
mean, if it's just reheated Skybound, that seems to. I think that diminishes what it's doing, but I could understand why somebody looking for something when you come out of nearly 20 years of IDW, where they were always doing something completely different, and Warren Johnson is I wouldn't go so far as to say he's delivering an entirely a nostalgia product, because he is trying to make something of it. You know, he is telling a story about something. He's telling a story about
Yep.
death and about war and about fathers.
Yes, 100%. I completely agree with you on that one. What I will say, however, in regards to Skybound, is that I'm so glad that Void Rivals exists.
Yeah,
I
Void
think that
Rivals is
actually
great fun, isn't it?
I think that's my favorite book going at the moment. I'll be perfectly, and I don't get me wrong, I'm not up on the GI Joe stuff.
Me neither.
You know, but yeah, Void Rivals, I am loving that.
That book has when it was not so clear at the very start, but now we are in the mid-teens. That's just a sort of Transformers satellite book now. When you've got Hot Rod, Springer, the Skuxoid, and the Quintessons all running around in it on a regular basis. And, you know, events in recent issues making clear that this is not just a comic set in the Transformers universe. This is very much a sister title, unlike, you know, G.I. Joe, which has not lent heavily on the Transformers connections, except for using them as an exciting incident to essentially radicalize Duke into taking up this fight. Void Rivals is very much married to Transformers. You know, it's not tied into the story going on in Transformers. It's its own book. You could just read it and be happy, or not read it and not be missing out on any important context for the Transformers comic. But that's really it's a Transformers comic.
Well, it is, and this is the thing. You know, we know that Daniel Warren Johnson's got less than a year left on the book, and I feel like there's going to be a lot of people who are just reading that Transformers book are going to be caught very much off guard in the next 10 months or so if they haven't been reading Void Rivals, because I suspect that regardless of what Daniel Warren Johnson's end goal is, the next step to whatever the Transformers main book is going to be playing out, slowly building through Void Rivals.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it'll, as you say, I don't think it'll impact Johnson's end game.
No.
What I mean, I could very much imagine Kirkman just taking over the book after Johnson leaves.
I think he's the perfect choice, isn't he? From a business point of view, if Hasbro are like, right, Daniel Warren Johnson, Eisner Award-winning Daniel Warren Johnson.
Eisner Award-winning Transformers comic. What a ridiculous sentence.
It is, isn't it? It is.
I mean, you know what? It's 40th anniversary. Give it an Eisner, sure. Why not? Go for it.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, exactly. But
see the year in well.
But I'm sure Hasbro is sitting down and saying, right, well, you know, who have you got in line after him? And it's like the guy that created The Walking Dead. He'll do. Like, you know, I would not be in the least bit surprised if Kirkman takes over. At least,
thing about Void
even
Rivals
if it's just
very
for
specifically is it served as a proof for me that he actually does know what he's talking about. He's not Pat Lee. He's not, it's a real shame Sideswipe died in the movie and then they introduced all those G2 characters. That's not his, you know, he knows who the Skuxoid is and that he had a wife and kids. You know, he clearly knows what's up. You have to imagine he's just champing at the bit to actually write the main book. You know, as you say, even if it is only for 6 issues as a transition, but I'm not sure if Robert Kirkman's ever written anything he wants to write for just 6 issues.
No, that's true. But I feel like, you know, Kirkman, I think it's fair to say Kirkman probably has a greater grasp on Transformers and stuff than Johnson, you know,
the wider universe, perhaps. Yeah, I mean, Johnson, he's fully self-admitted his frame of reference is quite narrow. You know.
Yeah, definitely. But you know, those books are really solid, and while, like I say, I may not be loving exactly what's going on at the minute, I'm still reading them avidly. In fact, actually, as of today of this recording, there's a new issue dropped.
There is. It's a bit frosty out, so it might be a bit slippy, but I might venture out to get it.
Yeah. So Transformers 1, absolutely fantastic. The comics really going solidly. Again, if people aren't reading it, go pick up Void Rivals. But let's dovetail a little bit into the brand, because I think we might have a few issues with the direction that it's going in at the moment.
Well, it's what I was saying there before about Hasbro's control of lore, and all that. Like, aside from those three, the three classic traditional tentpole pieces of Transformers media, comic, cartoon, movie, there's been a lot of slop as well. There's been a lot of mobile game crossovers and protein powders, and the new man in charge, Chris Cox, the new head of Hasbro, he does seem quite happy to sell the Transformers license to anybody who rocks up with a hot sandwich and a handful of change, regardless of the product that it's being attached to. And I do in 2024, I have found that quite exhausting and trying. 1 minute Takara told me, Takara told me, but 1 minute they and Studio Trigger will drop that beautiful 40th anniversary video. And then the same evening, Hasbro will announce a Clash of Clans mobile game crossover. 1 minute, Transformers 1 will come out with its beautiful artistry, created by a team of passionate artists and creators. And then the next day, Hasbro will announce the Transformers are in Minecraft now, and it's tiring. You can't miss something if it's absolutely everywhere you look, and there's something so coldly, mercilessly corporate feeling about the way the brand and the IP are being milked right now, as compared even to some of the other absolute peaks of marketing blitz, like back in the Generation 1 days or the peak of the live action movie era. There's something that leaves such a bad taste in my mouth about the way that the IP is being farmed out currently. I mean, to even call it an IP, we're normal people. We shouldn't be talking about it like an IP. That's boardroom contract fondler talk. That's not something normal people should have to talk about, but we all do, because that's the way that the last half decade, the streaming wars have broken up all of art and entertainment and compartmentalized it and made us think of it as content owned by a certain corporation and gated off into its own unique service that you have to go to them to be provided with it. And that's very much seems to be how Chris Cox is intent on treating not just Transformers. It's happening with well, I suppose Magic the Gathering is the other big example of the Hasbro property that he's mistreating. But it exhausts me. And I feel exhausted by a lot of pop culture currently. So Transformers is not unique in that regard, but I do find it very, very tiring. And maybe it's an age thing. I mean, certainly younger people who have come of age in this era see nothing wrong with the Minecraft Transformers crossover and have been excoriated on Twitter for complaining about it. It'll get kids into the brand. Well, they're not getting brought in by much else currently, but maybe I can hope things like that will calm down a bit now that we're out the back end of the 40th anniversary, and they don't feel like they have to capitalize upon that by thrusting it onto every surface possible. We'll see in 2025.
There was a few things during the 40th anniversary which I was very excited for in concept, but then ultimately the execution of that was a real letdown. Bigger. For example, when I heard that Dark Horse were going to be making Transformers Generation 1 themed collector's cards.
Dynamite, isn't it?
Oh, sorry, it was a Dynamite. Yeah, Dynamite.
Well, those ones, yeah.
Yeah, I was all on board with it. The idea of going into a shop, buying packs, collecting, trading with friends. I mean, at a convention, perhaps, because my 40-year-old work colleagues are not going to be bringing their cards in.
Sure.
But I thought it was great. But then it turned out, actually, no, it's a Kickstarter and it's a one and done, and enjoy it. And it's like, right. So all of the joy that I was going to achieve from it has now, as an old man, I can feel like, all right, so I don't have to troll through and hope to get all of them. I can just buy it all in one go. But it is at a considerable markup. Little things like that.
Well, Dynamite has been mismanaging Kickstarters quite a lot recently. They've put up collections of Gargoyles, Darkwing Duck. They're doing a Thundercats one now. There might be a few others I'm not aware of. As far as I'm aware, and the cards. As far as I'm aware, not a single one's actually been fulfilled yet. I mean, I haven't seen any YouTube videos of people unboxing those cards. Whenever they, because I did get approached by, I'm sorry, we'll get a little corporate here, but I did get approached by Dynamite to promote the card Kickstarter, and I thought, oh, cool, okay, send me some cards, I'll open them up on a stream or whatever, and we can. No, but they don't have any cards because they haven't done the Kickstarter yet, and I'm like, so you just want me to just say, hey, everybody, go and click on this, and that's all? Well, no.
Yeah, I think the genuine success, however, of 2024 in terms of licensing.
I know what you're going to say.
Well, yes, I am, but then I'm going to, point out the corporate issue, which is that, they're right here in front of me. Blockies have been the smash success.
I would agree with you. I think that has been one of the biggest successes of the 40th anniversary. People are mad for these little guys, and rightly so.
They are. But now, how many model kit builds companies is out there?
I mean, there's so many, right? It's exhausting, as I say. They're producing a lovely product, but there's just so much of it, and it's stepping on each other's toes so much. Yes, in academically, I understand that the Blockies version of Rise of the Beasts Optimus Prime isn't the same as the YOLO part model kit version of Optimus Prime. I mean, I really understand that the YOLO part ones just want to be action figures, but the licensing means that they can't just sell action figures because Hasbro's doing that. So they have to sell them as model kits in order to get them out there. But it's like, even within Blockies itself, like, how many different kinds of Blockies are there?
Yeah.
There's the big ones, the less big ones, the little ones, and now they've just announced the Ickle Wicklest ones. And I'm like,
yes,
well, guys, tighten it up.
Yeah, what I will say in regards to Blockies, because again, just a massive fan of the product.
Lovely things, beautiful little things. Can't allow them into my home or heart, because if I do, I will be tripping over them.
Yes, yeah, exactly. That's it. But every single one that they do is absolutely wonderful. But yeah, then it's just become this tidal wave of every model company is now doing Transformers, and it's just a bit excessive. It's a little bit like, you remember a couple of years ago when Super 7 were getting ready to release their Action Master figures at the same time that Hasbro was producing the Transformers Red series, and it's like, wait a minute, what's going on here? Like, there should be one line
about as long as the other.
The issue with that, I think, sort of stems a little bit into the problem that we're seeing here, and you touched on it a little bit earlier on, which is that and I would suggest, because this brand is dovetailing off the back of a decade of billion-dollar-plus movies, we have reached a point where something like Earthspark, where it's got a brand new cast of characters, is the outlier because they cannot afford to release Transformers that isn't Optimus Prime, Bumblebee, Megatron, and Starscream.
There's not a lot of risk taking. There's little in the way of
iconic designs.
Yeah. That's the thing, is that, to say it clearly, is like Transformers, for a very long time, it was a toy line promoted by and supported by Associated Media. Somewhere along the way, can't put a finger down exactly on when, but in the 2010s, Transformers is now an IP that is farmed out. And there are toys, and it started as toys, but it's sold as an IP. It's become inward looking. It's why, yes, as you say, there'll always be a Bumblebee, an Optimus Prime, a Megatron, and a Starscream when that didn't used to be the way.
Mm.
And it's been that way. And I felt that at the end of the 2010s. I really did. When Siege rolled around, I was extremely cold on Siege. Because I really
the design, the concept, or
not even that. They looked good. It was just the fact I sat and I asked myself, how do I justify buying another Optimus, another Megatron? How many of these guys can I keep buying? I'd already not bought like the Starscream figure from Power of the Primes that year or whatever. In other words, I don't need another Starscream, I said. Then I did make the mistake of having to go on a friend's Siege Optimus, and I was like, oh no, this is terrific actually. And then I went in, I went all in on Siege. But then, and this sort of speaks to what I was talking about saturation and exhaustion there earlier on, is that I feel like a lot of us wouldn't have bought Siege if we'd known what was coming a year later in Earthrise.
The designs that you wanted in the first place.
Not to denigrate the quality of the Siege figures as toys.
Yeah.
But it does kind of feel like they're mugging us off.
Yeah.
And that has regrettably continued over the years, where we'll get a Siege Ironhide that's retooled into an Earthrise Ironhide that a year later they make Studio Series Ironhide the toy we wanted in the first place.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, and I grant you, okay, there's been a number of years separating Earthrise Prime and this year's centerpiece, Commander Class Studio 86 Optimus Prime. But, like, do you need another Optimus Prime now that I mean, I didn't feel like I needed another Optimus Prime after I bought the Earthrise one, and then they came out with this one, but it's like, what do you do next? What do you do after 40 years whenever you've now just created the perfect toy based on the cartoon design, complemented by a lovely new modern toy based on the classic classic toy design in both Legacy and Missing Link? What do you do next? What do you do?
Well, I had this. I always go back to the recent Blaster toy, because that was the moment that I held that figure in my hand and went, "This is the last Blaster toy that I'm ever going to need to buy." It
was Hoist for me. Earthrise Hoist for me.
And there's so many of us are having that feeling of we're reaching an endpoint. Now, don't get me wrong. They have announced for 2025 new combiners. We're getting new aerial bots. We're getting new Constructicons.
Yeah.
Yes, they are going to be great toys. Regardless of your opinion on the combining technology behind it, they're going to be great and will be closer to the Sunbow style cartoon than the Combiner Wars.
Yes.
But then,
what do you do next?
What's next? And that's why I feel like, and I know you and I have talked about this privately in the past, and I think this is a great platform to talk about it. This is why I have been screaming for the last couple of years, we need Armada 2.0.
And I think Earthspark was something that held the potential to be that, because you look at Earthspark and the main cast is all new characters, but they are backed up with a supporting cast of only the most iconic faces in the Transformers lore IP Bible that Hasbro have been using to determine the direction of the franchise for 15 years.
Yeah.
I mean, like, there's a mentality. And now we're speaking of this from the perspective of people in our 40s. There are people in their 30s who came into Transformers later on who maybe didn't get Combiner Wars Superion or Combiner Wars Devastator and are looking forward to a chance to get, and that's fair enough. But back in the 2000s, when we started with Chug, when we got Classics and Universe, and then that turned into Generations, the point of those toys was to modernize characters from an, at that point, 20-year-old toy line, to either create more show-accurate figures, even in the case of Masterpiece figures back from the time, to create more show-accurate figures, to give them modern standards of articulation and weapon integration, and to perhaps modernize, in some cases, modernize their alternate modes whenever, their classic alternate mode was outdated. And that was the point of creating new toys of older characters. But that's different today. Things have changed, and it's a point I've been making for a long time. And it's a point I feel like Hasbro is on. They understand it, but they have difficulty implementing it sometimes. Is that, like, well, for instance, right? We don't need new Transformers animated toys. They did them right the first time around. We already got perfectly show accurate, well articulated, quality Transformers toys of the animated cast. So now if they remake a Transformers animated character, and they've done what? 3? If you don't count Bulkhead, because that was technically a Prime Bulkhead. 3? I want to say 3. And they're all not as good as the original animated toys, even if they might scale better with each other. They're less show accurate, and they only exist for the purposes of releasing new toys of those old characters, because those are the characters and those are our characters, and we have to have those characters. It's a character lore IP based way of looking at the franchise instead of a toy based one.
Yeah, we're not getting Constructicon animated.
Why
figures.
In Christ's name are we not getting animated? If you want to make new animated figures, make the guys that didn't get made the first time around. Like, animated was one of the canary in the coal mines of the issue that has plagued the cartoon-based Transformers toy lines for the last decade, where we don't get everybody in them.
Yeah, 100%. And that is the big issue, isn't it? Like, they're doing it because it's an Optimus Prime, it's a Bumblebee, and because they assume corporately, when I'm saying they assume, I am guessing here. I have no access internally to Hasbro's thoughts or anything like that. But they are saying it's Optimus Prime.
And I do like that about it, because you look at Legacy and you can see how off the back of the War for Cybertron trilogy, they'd made a great Optimus in Earthrise, and they didn't need to make so in Legacy, the Optimus Prime figure of each of the years is Laser Rod G2, animated, and Armada. Right. Those were the Optimus Primes of the line for that year. And that was, as much as I may have take issue with the idea of modernizing toys that necessarily that gain nothing in the process, other than to keep that version of the character in circulation to service fans of that character, rather than to actually produce a better toy. It was a nice approach to it. It allowed for some diversity. But I said earlier that I feel like Hasbro's on the cusp of these ideas. It's like, I loved the Prime Bulkhead figure that they did. A lot of people took issue with the Prime Bulkhead figure in the first issue of the Legacy Wave. Well, we got a show accurate, nice, transforming, well articulated Prime Bulkhead already. The only redefine it. Yes, I mean that to me was the right move, was to rework the character with a new alternate mode. Or a new design style. But you see how a lot of people reacted, and they don't want that. They just want a new toy of the old character looking the same way he always looked. And I'm like, well, what's new and interesting about that? This is just me, I mean, a lot of people didn't enjoy that Bulkhead, so fair enough. Who am I? This is just my stance on it. But it seems to me that was the stance that figure was created. That was how the creation of that figure was approached.
But that's it. If you're going for a line which is a sort of catch-all of the 40 years of your history, that for me, the biggest problem that you've got with that situation is that you're always going to end up with an incomplete product.
Yeah, yes. Oh, that's so true. It's like that people go, they started doing some Armada guys, and then people are like, give me Demolisher, give me Scavenger. They're not remaking all of Armada. It's not happening.
Well, even if you look at it not from a toy line point of view, but just from an animation point of view, we still haven't got Beast Wars yet. We're only like 3 characters away. You know,
I suppose
like,
if you what do we got?
Death
We
Charge,
Death Charge,
and Quick Strike.
Yeah. But you do notice how that even those figures, we've still not done any Transmetals. We've done Transmetal 2 Megatron, but like everyone else is their standard appearance because they did Transmetals right the first time around.
Yeah. But so that's it. What I will give Hasbro credit for, which I think is an important thing, is that they've been very good at re-releasing relatively recent toys that have been difficult for people to get hold of.
Yes, I think I'm very much in favor of that. It makes me think back to the days of G1 when a toy could happily be permanently on shelf for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, Earthrise Soundwave, for example, originally was the Netflix Soundwave, very difficult to get hold of. Now they've put him back out again, given us more cassettes. Okay, increased, better paint, much better figure. I was very happy as well because mine was unfortunately struck with the dreaded yellow plastic.
Yeah, and the yellowing too. But doesn't it make you feel a little bit like a mug for buying the first one?
Yes. 100%.
This is the
yeah.
But whenever they just straight re-release something, like we're here in the first month of 2025, so Ramjet, Origin Bumblebee are on the horizon. Velocitron Cosmos is getting a re-release. Metal Hawk happened, and he was repainted a bit, but when it's just a straight release, great. Whenever you're doing these little, when they've just done with Studio Series Springer, or like they're about to do with Studio Series Galvatron. It makes you feel a little bit like a mug for buying the first one. And that's part of the problem with this extreme fan targeting approach that they've taken. And an approach that they've taken, I feel like, on the basis that they know we're mugs and we are going to buy a lot of this stuff anyway. But there is a limit. And I feel like a lot of people are hitting their limits. Like you say, you don't need another blaster. So I don't imagine that whenever they repainted that blaster slightly for Studio Series, that you felt the need to buy it.
No, none whatsoever. But what I will say is that the cynical part of my brain can't help but wonder if the reason that there hasn't been a Soundwave released with a Ratbat yet is because there's a third release of that figure on the horizon. Maybe as a I was about to say new Soundwave there, but that's a very bad dub. But as a Sound Blaster. Sound Blaster? Yeah.
Sound Blaster, yeah.
Yeah. I'm just greetings, new Soundwave. But yeah, it's like, okay, where's Ratbat? Because that's your love of Ratbat. Well,
I love a bit of Ratbat.
Absolutely, and I suspect if there was one cassette, nobody cares about a buzzsaw.
To be fair, a lot of people it took them an inordinately long time to get around to making a buzzsaw, and people
that's true.
That they hadn't. Do you know what my theory is? Actually, just a total theory, but we do know that they talked about doing a purple Marvel Comics Soundwave for the Comics Generation line. I reckon they were probably going to pack that with at least a Ratbat, if not more. Those were all same size class, weren't they? So those were all like leader price boxes, weren't they? Yeah, so at least a Ratbat and maybe some others. Yeah, that'd be my theory anyway. Purely making it up, but we might. And the comics line, that's another great entry for the 40th anniversary. I've been saying it for a year or two now, but like the Marvel comic has been going through its period like of the lowest possible relevance to the brand ever. It's weird when we're old enough to think back and remember where there were these two pillars of Generation 1, the Marvel comic and the Sunbow cartoon, and both were equal in the eyes of God. Like these were the two things, and you just look how completely the Marvel series has fallen by the wayside. Even in you look at the toy lines and you see how many characters from the cartoon, the toys are all designed to try and capture the appearance of the cartoon character models. You get things like DevCon and Nightbird getting turned into toys, and at best you manage an Impactor in Seeds, which is really based on the IDW comics rather than the Marvel comics, and so it's great for this series to come along in the 40th anniversary and actually give the Marvel comics some love,
Oh, 100%. I mean, like Flame, Zaron,
they were. I mean, and honest, I didn't buy any of the others because I've got a Grimlock and I've got a Shockwave, and I didn't feel the need to buy those. They didn't feel like upgrades or improvements or anything. Zara on a Flame, open palm slam on the pre-order button day one. Yes.
Are you telling me that you're not a big fan of dot coloring on Transformers toys?
Not a huge fan of the choices that were made there, but
no.
For Zaron and Flame, I will.
Yeah, like that was perhaps the biggest surprise. And we live in a world now where, and this is another thing that I will give Hasbro credit for as well in 2024. I feel like they've gotten a lot better at getting ahead of the leaks, because we live in a world now where we're not excited because some toy listing has dropped 12 months ahead.
Well, the guy who's been doing that for years says that he's out of the game now. He's not doing it anymore after last year. So we've seen the full listing for Age of Primes for this year, but we don't know what's coming in 2026. And you look at even toy leaks. This year's product, we've seen, it's been like the old days. A couple of off-color prototypes missing parts is all we got to see of Red Alert and Prima before those were officially released, as opposed to fully fresh from the factory, fully painted, stolen copies being shown off in detail on YouTube. And I'm all for it. Like, if that's the form leaks have to take now, because we'll never be totally free of them, please, yes, absolutely. Give me that crap looking rubbish so that I can actually enjoy a full, proper first official look of the figure.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the way that they have been presenting things with their pulse streams, I think that's great, because it's quite clear that, Ethan and Mark and the team, they just love this stuff, and their passion is infectious on the screen. Like,
it is. I find myself like, I sometimes question the things that they focus in on, like Ethan's focus on cartoon accuracy and stuff like that, but they're clearly, passionate guys who love what they're doing and are putting their all into it. And the streams are, like, we've had our Hasbro Pulse Cons and everything, and I'm sure you and I have joked about it in the past, but it's like, honestly, mate, just show us an automated slideshow of product, 5 minutes in and out, boom, we're done, But as they have honed the shape of those live streams over time and boiled it right down to all we really actually want to see. And I like how that those product streams are able to give us more information about the designers at Takara Tomy involved, or even the package artists, giving credit to creators who have never been given clear and explicit credit before. That is something that on the toy side of things in particular, that those streams have really opened up and allowed them to do over the years. Yes. I think we're both quite looking forward to what's coming in 2025 as Age of Primes, because as much as we were talking there about how so many of the toys that are coming out now are just about recreating old ones with less of the features. In the case of things like I'm thinking of Armada Red Alert here, with him being one of the first toys coming this year. The central focus of the line is on characters who've mostly never had toys before, and that is good and exciting. And that's what I mean when I say, you have to assume the guys at Hasbro, your Evans and your Marks and that, are cognizant of what we're sitting here talking about. The question of what one does next to keep the audience engaged whenever the suits upstairs are insisting that it be all Optimus Primes and Bumblebees. Like with Legacy Bulkhead and things like that. It does feel like they are approaching that question and finding ways to address it. Okay, so Legacy Bulkhead has detractors and that, but the Primes never had toys before. Let's do it. Let's do 2 years of that. Yes, absolutely. Hit me.
What I would say, I'm all for characters that have never had toys before, but I think if there's one thing that I need Hasbro to do, is figure out a way to make Transformers more engageable for kids.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's the other whole thing. You don't want to sit here and just go, well, the adult fans are being treated like mugs and the kids get nothing. But
because with the best will in the world, I mean, we've talked just a few minutes ago about how much we love Transformers 1. My biggest regret is the fact that I say regret, but my biggest disappointment, I suppose, with Transformers 1 is that it feels like it was treated as an afterthought rather than what could be a defining moment for the brand for the next 5 years. Because at the end of the day, the only way to get reasonably priced, reasonably complete figures of the characters that we all love is to buy blockies, not actually buy official Transformers product from a shop. And with the best will in the world, that can never happen when little Timmy goes to his mum and says, I want that figure, and little Timmy's mum realizes that figure is £25.
I mean, the price of Transformers is a excuse me is a real issue for making it accessible like that. But even then, like the decisions that have been going into these lines since Age of Extinction, honestly, you go back, that's when they decided the movie line will be mostly gimmick focused. And that carried on into Robots in Disguise 2015, which did have a core deluxe adjacent size class as a sort of bone thrown to long-term collectors for figures they might actually want. But so many characters, we're talking about animated earlier, which carried on into RID, like so many characters didn't get compatible figures with that size class. And RID 15 was a show jam-packed with characters, and so many of them didn't get proper toys. And it carried on into the Last Night toy line. It carried out into the Bumblebee movie toy line. Of course, not that there was a huge well of characters to draw on there. It carried on into the Cyberverse toy line. And that's the way that what we used to call, but which it now feels wrong to call, the main line, that's the way it's been treated for a decade now, worsening each time. Two, and this is the bit that drives me mad because I can't correlate these two officially properly. I don't have the data. I'm not a marketing guy. I don't see the spreadsheets. To diminishing returns each time, culminating in a really good movie like Transformers 1 dying on its arse. And how much is one to do with the other? I don't know. And if I've said it many times, honestly, like if I could have my druthers, we would ditch this formula we've been using for the last 10 or 15 years of a fan line and a kids line, and just have one line again that all the energy and the passion and the money and the quality goes into, supported by a cartoon or a film or whatever. And it would be made for toys first, and then they would make the media based on that.
Basically what they did in the early 2000s.
Yeah, and it does. There's an air of that where I'm saying, I wish everything was the way it used to be, and it's bad that they changed it. And I'm not trying to be like that, but we have lost some sense of the new, some sense of innovation. You just have to look at the toys that are being made for kids, and the frustrating disconnect that there is between the toys and the media connected with those toys, because everything is made for cartoon first. We're talking about the Constructicons early on. Everything's made for cartoon first now. Earthspark, RID, Prime, Cyberverse, since animated, it's all been made for cartoon first, and then the toys are made based on the cartoon character designs, which results in toys that aren't able to fully capture the look of the characters in the cartoon because the characters are being designed for animation without a mind towards how they would really transform if they were toys. I mean, you just have to look at nearly everything in the RID 15 line in particular and see how everybody's sort of got squashed vehicle hoods and windows on their chests, which none of the toys all have the details there, but they don't transform that way because they're not designed to look that way. And I just think we should get back to doing it the other way around.
Perhaps I see Hasbro differently to the way Hasbro sees themselves. Hasbro's a toy company.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? They don't think of themselves that way anymore. Well, Brian Goldner was the one with the big plan to make Hasbro an IP company, an entertainment company, of which toys were just a part. And then, very sadly, Brian Goldner died, and Chris Cox now just wants to sort of bleed it dry instead of trying to actually innovate something.
one of the big hopes that I have is that, if the more you're licensing out, the hopefully at some point you can license out to somebody, who has a genuine love and passion for it and knows how to handle it. The only thing is, obviously, the one thing that they won't license out is transforming robots.
Yeah.
So let's just hope that in that regard they can create something that is more kid friendly, kid approachable, at a better price point for families, and also something that you can then build the next several years around.
And because I feel like for all this complaining, it's not to take away from the fact it really has to be stressed how good Transformers toys are right now.
Oh yeah.
Like since the inception of Combiner Wars, really, but then it took another quantum leap at the inception of Siege. They're so much better, so they feel so much nicer in your hands, nicer to transform than anything from earlier in the 2010s, whenever Hasbro was really struggling under the new pricing system, under the new budget restrictions that came in with Prime. Like guys, you don't remember how bad those Fall of Cybertron toys were in 2012. Like, that was a rough year, lads. Oh, you don't, and even if picking up like a Thrilling 30, like it took a little rebound for Thrilling 30, but there's no comparison.
No,
no. But then as they started to pump it up again with Combiner Wars in 2015, you could see the kids line really take the hit. I don't know if I'm sure it wasn't actually a case of money was moved from one to the other, because that doesn't make any sense. That can't be how these things are organized. I don't know. I'm not a money man. I don't know. But you could see that, and that disparity of build quality has visibly continued. Even the Earthspark deluxe figures, the sub deluxe warrior figures, the small assortment of those they've made, they don't feel as good as your average Generations figure. And they're being made by a whole different team. That's not Evan Ben. I think their team is in, were they in New York or something like that? I can never remember. Or LA or something like that. I can never remember. They're not wherever it is Hasbro are doing their, I guess they're in the Rhode Island. I don't know.
Yeah. In terms of the quality of the toys, they are absolutely fantastic. I mean, the build quality on them is great, and there are genuinely times when I will hold a figure in my hand and go, how the hell did you do that? Like, I've looked at the steps, but there's just a magic to them. So the stuff is fantastic. And I tell you what, like, in terms of magic, if we're talking about really positive things, I think one of the big changes, it hasn't hit yet, but it's coming next year, this new idea for reducing the cost of the Titans line. Like,
yes, that's a great,
a good idea.
I mean, reducing the cost back down to what it was when it started.
Fair.
I wouldn't harp on it so much if it wasn't over such a short period of time. Like, it's gone up from 150 to 200 in the US, 150 to 220 of the King's English pounds.
Yes.
And Legacy didn't have a great run on Titans. Not speaking to the quality of the figures, but Kingdom started strongly with, War for Cybertron started strongly with Omega Supreme, Scorponok, and the Ark. I mean, the Ark is sort of when people started to feel like the cracks were starting to appear with reduced articulation and things like that. But then Legacy comes in and it's like Cybertron Metroplex. No, sorry, that was a misfire, guys. Bad choice. Nemesis to complement the Ark, yes, but, and I'll come back to my butt in a moment. And then Tidal Wave, and it's like with the Legacy Titans in particular, as the price went up, that's when we saw the features getting costed out. Like every Titan before had come with a little guy, and then you get Cybertron Metroplex and you got Armada Tidal Wave, guys who classically have a little guy not coming with their little guy and not having any like interactivity or features in any capacity. And aside from that and the price and the diminishing content that you were getting with those figures, the marketably reliable or the reliably marketable number of characters that could feasibly be done at that scale was massively shrinking.
Yes.
So, and on that basis, I had no excitement for the idea of a Titan Star Convoy, because we knew it was going to be Star Convoy. And I had no excitement because I was imagining a far too big, because Star Convoy is not supposed to be that big, but a far too big, it's a Micromaster base, a far too big figure with no little hot rod, and then by extension, like none of the other stuff that you, and then boom, they announce it for it's smaller, but $50 less. It's got hot rod. It's not just got hot rod. It's got everything the old toy had and more.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, but yes, once again, day one pre-order, absolutely. And again, speaks to us like you have to assume. I mean, we went through a period there where stuff like that wound up on clearance in game a lot. And you have to assume it's things like what I've just been describing. I would like to believe it was more about realizing the limitations of making the figures that big, that the character choices and things that were having to be cut out of them were what informed their decision to shrink it, rather than in addition to, oh, we're not selling enough of them, we need to knock the price down on them, But as far as I could, like, I've got a pre-order in, I'm looking forward to them. And obviously shrinking down the size class massively broadens the scope for characters that can be included at that size as well. So yeah, I think the future looks a lot brighter for the Titan class. Whereas I genuinely was thinking after last year, it's like, right, lads, time to knock this on the head. Honestly, discontinue this price point.
Yeah, because not only are you talking about a toy that takes up an awful lot of shelf space, floor space, wherever you might be
it's
able to
floors in my house, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, that's it. Not only are you able to do that, but yeah, like more of these expensive. It's £150.
It's not cheap.
And it's not going to get any cheaper either.
No,
but
it feels like a very pro-consumer move amidst a sea of other moves. We've talked at length already about how so many toy releases now have a tendency to make us feel like mugs for buying the earlier version. The change to Titans feels like a very pro-consumer move, contrasted against a background of probably more, well, I don't know if they necessarily outnumber the pro-consumer choices, but it feels like it sometimes, of anti-consumer choices. Anti-consumer moves.
Yeah.
So that's good for me. I'm very happy about that decision this year.
It's sort of, it's a funny old place, isn't it? I feel like we're at a tipping point now with Transformers as to what's going to happen. And I have total faith in, Evan and Mark and the team to be able to bring us characters that, one, we want, and two, that are going to be great figures. But I just think the brand as a whole is ready for that next evolution. And I'll be perfectly honest with you, I don't think that next evolution is a Transformers G.I. Joe crossover live action.
No, I don't see that. At this point, after what happened with Transformers 1, after Hasbro deciding not to finance movies anymore, I think the chances that film actually gets made, never mind meets its 2026 release date current, I think the chances of that happening have massively dropped off.
There's probably a chance we'll see a live-action Masters of the Universe movie before we see another Transformers movie.
I would never have said that.
Yeah. So let's see what 2026, 2025 and onwards has in store for us. I'm very excited, if not a little bit reserved in that excitement. But
well, I'll tell you this. I'm looking forward to seeing what goes on with the comics. The future of Earthspark is a bit vague at the moment. There do seem to be more episodes coming. I'm hoping that it can continue its upward climb back from the severe drop-off that happened with the second season, which then should be followed by this cyber world thing, which we really don't know anything about. I don't think that's this year. So that's a bit of a mystery. I'm very much looking forward to Age of Primes. The concerns I have about the brand are related to the decisions being made by the people at the top, and how what they have sculpted it into have made it very difficult to imagine the kind of Armada 2.0 Beast Wars redo, not literal redo, that kind of seismic level change to the brand even occurring even within the next 5 years.
And
because this reframing of the thing as an IP that they sell toys of instead of a toy line that they market using this media has trapped us in a cycle of characters and ideas and lore that it's difficult to imagine breaking out of right now.
I don't. If you go back to the original days of the MCU, Iron Man, Thor, Captain America, these were B and C tier Marvel
Not household
characters.
names.
Not, certainly Captain America probably was. Outside of that, not really. However, those characters were treated well and ultimately formed the backbone to the point now where it's arguable to say that the MCU is struggling to exist without them.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
And so, maybe it is going to require somebody to say, right, let's keep focusing on Transformers, the big guys, your Optimus Primes, your Megatrons, things like that. But let's also start building up these lesser characters into the household names that people associate with Transformers in order for us to have a more healthy and vibrant landscape within Transformers. That feels like it should be a good idea, but unfortunately, I just don't think it's ever going to happen because I just don't think Transformers right now has got the footprint in any real media, if that makes sense.
It's hard. Like, you talk about health, and I'm sure, like, by all rights, Transformers is doing quite well. Okay, the film didn't go down well this year, but like, as a brand, like, it seems healthy. I mean, I was talking earlier on about my general feeling of exhaustion. It's like when I go into a toy shop, or whenever I don't know, it might be an internet informed thing when all you're seeing is new toy announcements on the internet, but it just feels like everything is just some version of He-Man or Masters of the Universe or Transformers or G.I. Joe or something now, and the stuff that's selling to kids in toy shops seems to be based on Mr. Beast and other YouTubers and things like that. And I don't know. I really do genuinely worry about Transformers going the way of G.I. Joe and fully giving it up and just selling only to the adult collectors. Yes, making the toys to a standard that allows them to be sold on shelves and toy shops so they're safe for children to buy. But, G.I. Joe Classified, it's not been made for kids. It's like Masters of the Universe, right? Like 20 years ago, the 2002 series of Masters of the Universe fell off so bad that Mattel couldn't sell He-Man for 20 years. They gave up and they fully had to sell He-Man through a subscription service online to fans. And that is what's happened to G.I. Joe. It's just that 20 years later, the market has changed so much that you can sell those in shops. And you get Masters of the Universe is selling figures in toys again, but it still hasn't, unfortunately, managed to capture the attentions of kids, even with that new cartoon on Netflix. And I really live in fear of Transformers going that way because I don't want it to. I mean, and the toys are great. The toys they're making for us as adult collectors are great. We've just been talking about the quality of the figures and how it's surpassing a lot of stuff from the previous decade. But it is all still made to, the standard that it means it's safe for children to play with. But they're not making a DevCon for 8-year-olds. They're not making the Fallen for my nephew. The choices that are going into what's being made are ones that are so fan derived, and then it's like they silo off the Optimus Primes and the Bumble. It's like, I think about how much the Earthspark toy line suffered from having to be half Optimus Prime and Bumblebee because they insist on making toys of those characters at the expense of a proper in-scale complete set of all 5 brand new characters from Earthspark being available within 1 year's worth of the toy line, which they weren't. And And it's the way that, yeah, I don't want to, but the way the kids line keeps getting mistreated, and it feels cyclical to me. It does. I mean, it feels like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It feels like the toys get worse, the media performs worse, so the toys get worse, and it feels like what we're spiraling into. And I don't want us to get there. But after Transformers 1 this year, it's hard to argue that we're not closer to it than we've ever been.
Yeah. Everybody will always talk about the success of the old Marvel comic books is the fact that they were effectively in all ages. They didn't hold punches, and sensibilities have certainly changed in the last 40 years in terms of...
That's it. You go back to the 70s and the 80s and the rise of the direct market and how the stories that allowed them to tell began targeting older and older audiences, to the slow carving out over 40 years, yes, but the slow carving out of the child audience such that kids now do not, and in many cases cannot and should not be, reading regular monthly American comic books. Now, fortunately, there's plenty of other good comics on this earth that kids can and should read and do. But, this is what began happening to Marvel and DC 40 or 50 years ago is what the kids' properties of that were coming out just as that was happening to comic books. That's what they're going through now, is that as they lose their child audience through either some combination of, listen, it's been 40 years, like time moves on, kids, things rise and fall. And there's a whole conversation to be had that neither you or I can have about the nature of children's entertainment in the 2020s and how much do kids even play with toys anymore and how much of it is electronic. These are questions you or I are not equipped to answer. But I would rather it go away than it wind up just being made for you and me.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. I 100% agree with that. And all I would
Many
say
people
is...
will not. There are angry comments down below.
Yeah. Oh, no, don't get me wrong. We all love Transformers. So if your belief is that, Transformers is my thing and it is for me, that's not the wrong way to be about it. You've grown up with this and you have been conditioned, to want this thing. That is what it is built upon. It is
with so much of what is being created now. And I'm not just talking about the toys. I'm talking about all the stuff that's happening outside it with the way the IP is being handled. With so much of that being created to service people our age. It becomes easier and easier to see why an attitude that was eminently mockable 20 years ago, mad adult fans being frustrated that the children's toy line wasn't catering to them, it becomes a more understandable position now in the way that the handling of the brand has changed so much.
Is there one toy or one book or something like that in 2025 that you are very excited for?
Well, I think we might have the same answer, I mean, we've only really seen the first wave of what's coming in 2025, but
true.
I gotta give me that Fallen, man.
Yeah, because nothing encapsulates what we've talked about than a figure of a character that was created 20 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, but it's the first good transforming Dreamwave Fallen figure. I think it's pretty much going to be the best Fallen figure ever, because the movie figures aren't particularly inspiring, the RIT figures aren't particularly inspiring, and it looks terrific with all the fire parts and stuff.
Yeah.
And he's got the cannon on there that's from the the Power of the Primes cartoon, but he's got the spear that's sort of like the one from 15, but also from Revenge of the Fallen, and it's that's what that generally is what I want to see more of in Transformers, is those weird hybridizations of like everybody got so mad when Shadow Striker came out in Legacy and it was a purple Sideburn, and I was like, oh yeah, more of this, so it's like the original Shadow Striker mashed up with Cyberverse Shadow Striker, but people don't seem to enjoy that as much as I do.
Yeah, but I think that Fallen looks absolutely fantastic. I think you're absolutely right. It's definitely the figure that I'm most excited for in 2025. But let's
I am
see.
definitely looking forward to Prima and Solus Prime and Star
Mm,
Convoy. Those are the ones I have pre-orders in. I've not bothered yet with like the Constructicons or the aerial bots.
mm,
Yeah, I mean, like Menace, I was very cold when they announced Menasor, and then Motormaster turned out to be one of the best toys of the year. And
right.
I always give that toy credit for, as cold as I was on the idea of the combiner skeleton frame, as they
Mm,
were showing it off in their live streams, talk up the live streams again, and showing how it wasn't literally like some third parties that invented the idea. It wasn't literally just a skeleton that unfolded in one piece with the head built into it and everything. How it was, the trailer literally like burst off into 5 pieces, which I started to think of as like enhanced versions of the classic combiner fist, feet, and torso pieces.
mm,
And how they had that bit where you put the Stunticon on and that unlocked the joint to allow it to open up. Like, so much effort went into preserving the combiner play aspect
mm,
of that
mm,
toy. Like, really what you're supposed to do is break the trailer up, attach all the Stunticons to the pieces, then bring them together and combine them. If it were me, again, I wouldn't advertise on the back of the packaging that you can create an unfinished Menasor and an unfinished Superion without the other aerial bots and Stunticons. I wouldn't promote that as part of the toy.
mm.
But that frame form worked for Menasor, worked for Motormaster, because he had a trailer to work with. You look at Superion and Devastator, Silverbolt and Longhall are just dragging huge wagons around that are gonna just, which aren't, it's not, it doesn't work like it worked for Menasor.
Yeah.
But this is the way things are now. And I mean, I think if you look at the Studio 86 Constructicon, so there is a lot of the Combiner Wars still in them.
Mm.
Not
Oh, yeah.
literally in like retooling terms or anything, just like in the look, the general way of the transformation. And yes, I mean, talking about being old and the passage of time and everything, but yes, it's been 10 years since Combiner Wars, so the last go rounds on those are 10 years, and that's not a short amount of time by any estimation, and by all rights it should be more than acceptable to redo those guys after 10 years, even if the question becomes, how do you ever do them again if you've done them to this quality now? But the thing I keep coming back to is, yes, it was 10 years ago, but those are being made for and targeted at us, people old enough to not think that was a long time ago. And
It was
you have to
such a long
and
time
they
ago.
are, I feel like they are taking in some ways our mindset into account, with certain things. I was talking about Bulkhead earlier on, and other things like that. And it is a real challenge that they will face going forward, is like, it's, how many years between 86 Prime and Earthrise Prime? It was 4 years. Again, not a short amount of time, to be fair, but just yesterday, as far as most of us are concerned. You got to start like taking into account how the people you're literally making these for think about time.
It's the thing that's going to get us all eventually. But
Yes.
it's but between that and the inevitable, there will still be another Optimus Prime toy to buy.
I don't know what form it will take, but it'll be there waiting, just lurking in the shadows.
Well, listen, Chris, I'm very conscious that I've taken up far too much of your time today. Far too much of your time.
Yes, this has gone a
So,
bit longer than we planned.
as always with
As
us,
always.
but I want to thank you very much for jumping on with me. And we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back, where I will be talking with Chris about something he's rather passionate about. Chris, I want to talk to you just very briefly, because we only have a couple of minutes left. One of the other things that you're involved in is Sonic the Comic, the podcast, a podcast documenting the history of the Sonic UK comic book. Tell me a little bit about it.
Yes, that's my other big online creative endeavor these past couple of years. Sonic the Comic, the podcast, which I co-host with Dave Bulmer, is an issue by issue, fortnightly go through. I don't like to call it a review, but you know there it is of the old of Sonic the Comic, the British Sonic the Hedgehog comic, one of my formative comic experiences. Um, uh, yeah, every fortnight, spend a couple of hours going through an issue of the series. We are over 5 years, nearly 6 years into the series now. It was only 7 years long, so we're getting towards the end. We cover everything. We cover all the strips, the editorials, all the ads, the letters, the pinups, the art, everything. Because while it is a podcast looking at a Sonic the Hedgehog comic, it's really a podcast about about what it was like being a kid in the UK in the 90s.
Mm. And, you know, I am famously not a Sonic guy.
Sure.
I played Mario.
Who would want to be? Who would want to be a Sonic fan? Well, you wouldn't choose it.
You know, but there's an awful lot of talk, especially online, about the US Sonic comic and the drama that ensued and all of the legal battles and who owns this and all of that stuff. What was the difference? What was the main difference between the US Sonic comic then and the UK comic?
Oh, it's too much to get into, honestly. But like a big motivating factor in us deciding to do this podcast was the way that the British Sonic the comic in online discussions is treated as this weird foreign footnote as compared to not specifically the Archie comic, the American Sonic comic, but everything else in Sonic. And it's like, no, we were there. We lived through it. It wasn't some weird foreign thing. It was the true Sonic lore when we were that age and we lived in the 90s. And because all of if you want to talk about the big difference is that the world of Sonic as presented in the comic was actively derived from the games and the lore Bible that Sega of America created, which then which didn't inform anything made in America. They basically what happened was they made a Sonic cartoon in America, and then they did a tie-in comic, and then that tie-in comic grew to become its own publishing behemoth. But in the UK, Sonic and his friends live on Mobius and go through the zones and collect rings, and it's listen to the podcast for full dissection of it. But essentially, Sonic the Comic was the main piece of classic Sonic fiction that accurately presented the world of the games as they appeared in the games. So for us to go from something like that was about rings and emeralds and zones and the mechanics in them, not specifically the lore, because obviously the lore of the games was something that was created in Japan, but it didn't come through in the story of the games because they didn't really, there wasn't much of a story in them. But the aesthetics, the mechanics, the sense that when you were playing those games, you were playing the game of the comic, and when you read the comic, you were reading the comic of the game, as compared to American Sonic media, which was very much its own thing that owed very little to the games. That's the main distinction between the two. And it's always been frustrating to people like Dave and I that the piece of Sonic media that most accurately managed to capture that quality of the games, or that much of the games, is the one that's always been treated as an odd foreign footnote. So STCTP we often joke, it's about setting the historical record straight. And not to blow our own horns or anything, because we don't know if we truly can, but it does feel like the conversation around Sonic the Comic has shifted, and there's a lot more people talking about it and a lot more fan art being produced of it in the 5-6 years since we've started doing this podcast. We've got a Discord and everything of readers and listeners. And we've also got listeners who don't give a shit about Sonic, who just enjoy listening to the podcast because it is that little time capsule and discussion of what life was like back in the days of Woolworths, Pick and Mix, tiny cans of Coke, Amigas, and all the other things that we had in the 90s.
Is it easy to get your hands on the UK Sonic material nowadays?
Well,
Like,
there are scans of the whole comic. They've been online for donkey's years. They're
so the answer's
dreadful.
no.
It's not hard to get. But the scans don't have necessarily all the ads,
Okay.
and they're there's often copies that are sold on eBay. You know, I don't have a full collection myself because I don't have any of the ones that I had from when I was a kid anymore. So what I have, I've pieced together through donations or eBay purchases. Excuse me. But if you're just looking to read along with the podcast, yeah, there are scans out there, and
Okay.
our webmaster in the process of rescanning the comic to create new, actual high quality scans to go along with the podcast as well.
But this isn't like, say, for example, what we have with the Transformers Marvel UK stuff, where it's pretty much ignored and it's never been republished in the correct format and order.
Well, I wouldn't go so far as to say the Marvel UK Transformers stuff was ignored, because there have been at least 3 series that have managed to reprint most of it. But
Well,
yes,
yeah.
It's messy, certainly. And I do hope Skybound, that's the next thing they do after they get the Marvel US series out of the way, that they do a proper UK collection. But no, it's much like scans of Marvel UK do all exist. But no, there have never been any like official reprints of Sonic the Comic. It is there are rights issues involved, but it's also down to Sega not considering it on brand anymore. It's really unfortunate, and the same goes for the Archie stuff, the American comic as well, because that very suddenly and rather ignominiously ended about 7-8 years ago now. Just suddenly it was cancelled. Solicited issues weren't published, and the rights went over to IDW, and a lot of that Archie stuff will never be republished, not purely because it's not considered on brand anymore, but because of legal concerns surrounding the ownership of characters involved in the stories due to failures on the part of the company to secure the rights to them. And it's really dreadful that a whole portion of history can just be closed off in that way officially, that they'll never be able to publish official books, official collections. It makes a Transformers fan realize how lucky we are to have what we have, even if, in the case of the UK it's a little messy, or in the case of the American stuff, we have to see exactly what Skybound do with it yet. But if it's those nasty IDW recolored remasters, even if it is that, the material is still out there as compared to something like Sonic, where it's like, nope, can't have it, done, it's forbidden.
Well, there you go, everybody. If you want a trip down 90s nostalgia, then go check that out. Chris, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you very much for having me on. I'd just like to say Transformers is good, and I do like it.
We do, absolutely. And we
I
want
can
to thank you
understand
all.
how you might have come to a different conclusion based on the preceding hour, but I do like it, and it is good.
It is. In fact, one might say it's the best. But we will take our leave for now. Chris, again, thanks very much, and we will catch you all in the very next episode. Bye.
See you next time. Bye.